Mr. Young, what's the average that the Air Force now pays for a gallon of alternative fuel?
Right now, Senator, we're paying about $35 for the HRJ-derived fuels. That's down from $65 and $200 from when we started. So the price is dropping, and again, keeping in mind that we're buying batches of 30,000 gallons or so. So it's not full production by any stretch. On the Fisher-Tropsch side, it's much more reasonable. $3 to $4 is the current cost.
What's the does that price per gallon take into account the funding for R&D and testing and evaluation?
Certainly on the supply side it does. The Air Force is also spending about $20 million a year for our Air Force Research Laboratory and others that are involved in the fuel certification process and some of the other things that I talked about in my opening remarks.
What price range per gallon would alternative aviation fuel need to be at so it's affordable for the Air Force to use it in a majority of its fleet?
Well, certainly lower is better.
Yeah.
You know, and that's what's promising about the discussion that we're having today, particularly with the alternative fuels and the biofuels and the alcohol to jet, which is even more promising, I think. But I think, you know, our position has always been we're realistic here so that, you know, we're going to be willing to pay whatever the market price is for jet fuel.
Can you explain the importance to national security for commercial aviation and DOD to partner in the development of alternative fuels?
Well, certainly when we partner together, you know, our 10% added to their 90% sends a very strong demand signal to the producers and suppliers. Certainly looking at it from the point of view of having multiple suppliers enhances our ability to make sure that we have secure and reliable, sustainable sources of fuel, and that adds certainly to our ability to get our mission done.
I, in 2009, sponsored an amendment to the Defense Authorization Bill that allowed for multi-year procurement for alternative fuels. It ended up getting stripped out in conference, but it basically specified that DOD would be able to enter into contracts for up to 10 years if the fuel was cost-effective and environmentally friendly. I guess right now, with the 5-year limitation that you have on contracts, I'm curious in knowing what your thoughts are, and perhaps others as well might be able to comment on this. Would it benefit the Air Force and the industry if they were allowed to enter into multi-year contracts that exceed 5 years on the order of 10, 15, and 20 years? And would multi-year procurement authority help to obtain lower energy prices and increase energy resources?
Well, Defense Logistics Agency is the one that buys our fuel for us, but I will comment that I think it will. And we put a legislative initiative in, I believe, a year or so ago to do exactly what you're talking about, Senator. And I think anytime we can have price stability, it helps in our budgeting and certainly our planning and our programming for dollars that we're going to need to operate our Air Force. And it reduces the risk, as you've heard, I think, from some of the other panel members. And anytime we can do that, I think the cost of fuel is going to drop. But I will certainly defer to the other members.
And let me just expand on that, if I might, with Mr. Yonkers, Mr. Glover, Mr. Tadero. As you know, renewable energy and alternative fuel projects are very capital intensive in terms of investment. Would that sort of expanded multi-year contracting authority for alternative fuels enhance developers' ability to secure financing to get those types of projects going?
Well, I can certainly speak from our point of view. It depends on the process you use. You know, certainly longer is better, as cheaper is better. The processes we use tend not to be quite as capital intensive. So while 10 years would certainly be welcome, you know, numbers of years longer than that aren't necessary for us. For us, the issue more is a simple indexing system. So just the same way military and commercial aviation today know what the price of their jet fuel is with high reliability based on the price of crude oil. So we know what the price of renewable jet fuel will be based on the price of our feedstocks. So if we have long-term contracting authority, that's terrific. But even more important from our point of view is a simple index system. There'll be some years where we may be more expensive than jet and some years where we may be less. But that non-correlated hedge with domestically grown crops, in my opinion, ought to be something that we're actively pursuing.
Okay. You, I think recently were designated one of these BCAP sites. Secretary Vilsack just recently announced the creation of 4 additional projects, and I think you mentioned in your opening statement that you were chosen to receive BCAP assistance. BCAP is the Biomass Crop Assistance Program, which was authorized in the last Farm Bill. I'm wondering maybe if you could talk a little bit about how BCAP would be used by Altair and other companies to specifically develop alternative aviation fuels, how you think it can be used to stimulate growth in the alternative fuels industry, and whether or not you would have any recommendations as we look at the next Farm Bill about how to improve that program.
Thank you.
That's a lot of questions.
Right. Yeah. I was going to say, sort of taking the reverse order.
I'm trying to get through this.
Sure. So I'll answer them quickly. Yes, we were a recipient. It's a terrific program for companies like ours because we're out in the farming community, and farmers are conservative people. They make their living based on the weather, and they take risk related to the crops that they have to take. And if someone comes up to them and says, we'd like you to grow this new energy crop, and the reality is going to be they'll grow it worse the first year than the second, and worse the second than the third, and by the 4th or 5th year, they'll be experts at it the same way they are in their regular crops. That bridged ability to defer some of their risk is critical in farmer adoption, whether it's for my program or really any others. In terms of, it would certainly be my hope that people understood that if you're going to create a job an acre and we're going to do a 100-million-gallon facility, you're creating 1,000 rural jobs in the areas of the country where you should most want to create them. It has a multiplier positive profit-related effect to the government in ways I've rarely seen in other potential programs under the government. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.